I'm living in the basement of my aunt's house, and I'm laying on the bed with no money, no business, no car, no idea what I'm going to do. I was stuck.
When you see people who are, running businesses, what's the most common kind of lie that they're hung up on?
Most business owners that I come up against have this fundamental belief that if I just build the business big enough, then it will make me enough.
Welcome to another episode of Founders Growth. My name is John Hill, aka Small Mountain. I'm the founder of Adapted Growth, and today on the show we have Fredrick Douglas Bussey. He's the founder of Icon Status and the author of 2 books. The first one is called Breaking Orbit, and the second one is The Lie That Keeps You Broke. And most of his work is helping family-focused entrepreneurs make more money with less time so that way they have more time to spend with their family. Welcome to the show, Fredrick. I would love to kind of just dive in just immediately into like the lie that keeps you broke. What is that lie? And like, why do people get stuck?
Oh man. So first of all, thank you for having me, John. It's an
Of
honor to be
course.
here with you and having this conversation. Though the lie that keeps you broke, there are actually multiple lies, right? The lie is not always the same for everyone, but there are lies in the course that I teach around breaking orbit. I talk about what we call anti-beliefs, and there are beliefs that actually are inside of us, right? A belief is like a solid object. We hold these beliefs, but they're also invisible, and so they're how we see the world. So you're not always aware of what you believe in terms of it being an actual belief. It's just how the world appears to you. So these perspectives that we have, oftentimes they are built around actual lies. Right? And these beliefs that we have, because they're solid, we have to uninstall them because they're actually working, anti-beliefs are actually working against what we want to accomplish. So you can notice that we'll say that I want to be able to make 7 figures a month, or I want to be able to get married, or I want to be able to have this outcome in my life. And yet there are things that we believe about ourselves, about the world, about God, whatever it is, that actually work against us being able to accomplish those things. And because they're invisible, we're not always aware of what they are. So the purpose of um, the lie that keeps you broke is in order to be able to help people to illuminate what those lies are and then to help them to actually work through them. So it's a 30-day devotional, if you will, but every day you get to take one section of the book and work through a lie and understand how they show up in your life and how they can be dismantled. There's actual steps and questions that you ask yourself. So it's really a workbook, sense, but it takes you 15, 20 minutes a day to go through it and really kind of unpack those things and understand what is hiding in plain sight in front of you that may be keeping you as an obstacle from getting where you want to go.
Oh my goodness. I love the idea of making it a workbook, right? Because like, this is one of those things to where, you know, this is my big kind of like railing against just like workshops and
Mhm.
kind of skimming the surface of it and everything. Like if you're doing deep work, you need a space to actually work through it, because there was a long time to where everything that I thought was true had to be true, and that kept me stuck for a while, and thankfully I found really great coaching. But part of that coaching was like journaling, right? And having a space to kind of haul out my ideas,
Yes.
and they had these labels like head trash, right? Of just like, these are just garbage beliefs that you have sold yourself on.
Uh-huh.
And it took a long time to where, I could like look at that stuff honestly, as opposed to being defensive or, digging in that I was doing it the right way and everything.
Uh-huh.
When you see people who are, running businesses and they're entrepreneurs and they're they're feeling that kind of press that there's just not enough time, what's the most common kind of lie that they're hung up on?
Oh man. Well, there's several, but I think that they're all basically rooted in the idea that I am not enough,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
Most business owners that I come up against have this fundamental belief that if I just build the business big enough, then it will make me enough. I can be able to shut down the voices, the people that doubted me, the doubt that's inside of me, that people will see me. I'll be on the front, and then I'll matter more because I built this thing that's significant. I have enough money. I have enough purpose. Whatever the case may be. different tributaries that we can go down.
Mhm.
But ultimately, there is a sense of identity that is rooted in me building this thing that qualifies me to be worthy of love, attention, whatever the case may be. I mean, that's a deep psychological path to go down, but if you want to simplify it, that's what I would say it really boils down to. I'm trying to build something so that people can see me.
Interesting. And so, you know, a lot of these people are very goal driven, right? They're very goal oriented. And, if you've sold yourself on this identity that, you got to be here or else you're not a real entrepreneur, you're not really successful or different things like that.
Right.
Um, is the way out of that just like journaling and reflection? Like, do you think that that is enough, or do you think that there's other, specific things that people need to do for that change to really kind of come into play for them?
Well, I definitely think that there's reflection that's involved. Tony Robbins is famous for saying that the power of your questions determine the power of your life.
Mm,
When we work with our clients, we help them to see that way that you structure the question helps you to get you the desired outcome. And so sometimes we've been actually structuring the question wrong.
mhm,
Notice, for instance, that when things aren't working in your business, the first question that comes up is what's wrong? Right? What's going on? What do I need to fix? But the real question that they're asking themselves is what's wrong with me? Why can't I make this work? Why can't I get this to do? And just because they're efforting so hard, they're working, they're grinding, and oftentimes it's not even that they're working so hard, but they're thinking about it so hard. And the illusion that we have when we're thinking hard is that thinking is working. It's actually being productive. And so there are many different paths to being able to understand that, but you mentioned before we got on here, you had a coach. Having someone that you can have as a thinking partner, for instance,
oh,
uh, to be able to illuminate those shadows that are those blind spots that are kind of hiding in your work and your thinking. There are things that we do by practice, habit, ritual, right? That oftentimes create even more blind spots because we're just doing this and we're wearing the grooves deeper and deeper into the path that we're taking.
mhm.
And it gets more difficult to be able to pivot, to be able to take a slightly different path. And so it helps when you have somebody that can help to illuminate your thinking so you can ask yourself different questions or phrase them in a more powerful way to be able to help you to get an even better outcome.
I, uh, you know, I tell everybody, and not everybody believes me around this topic, but there's a special connection, right? Whenever you're coaching with someone, right? I learned this as like a martial arts instructor, right? Like some people just can't hear it from you, right? And so
Mhm.
you need someone who's not just going to kind of deflect it or put up the, well, you don't get it, this is different, I'm different, and all of that stuff, and that connection has got to be, it has to be there, or else, they're not getting any value, right? They're not going to be able to hear anything that we're talking about. And
Right.
then I just get frustrated in those moments, right? I don't really have a lot of patience for people who aren't really ready to be coached but are looking for help, right? Which is something I'm trying to be better about. In your business, right? When you're dealing with these people, do you run into a lot of that same kind of idea, that same sort of friction of people like wanting help, but when the help is not sexy or when it's not some brand new thing, it's just, reflection and discipline and being open and honest with yourself. Do you run into people who then kind of get defensive and want to try to make it about something else?
Absolutely. And one of the things about entrepreneurs that makes them so unique is that they are extremely stubborn, right?
Yeah.
And so by the time that they come to me, they've gotten a fair level of success. The challenge that people experience is that when you've gotten to a certain point and you can't get beyond it. So let's say that, a typical person comes to me 3, 4, $5 million a year, right? In that space, you're already far and above 95% of the people that are in your world,
Mhm.
if not 100%. And so you're already more successful in many ways than anyone else. And yet you know that there's another level that you want to get to, but the belief that it's possible by doing something different is not quite there yet because you have to understand yourself differently. There's a shift that you get to make. And if you're not ready to make that shift, because again, to go down that psychological path, there's an ego death that kind of happens there, right? We believe this thing about ourselves. We've had to believe in ourselves so hard to get to this level,
Mhm,
and now you're asking me to unbelieve in who I've been all the way up to this point and become someone new. So there's a level of stubbornness, and so they start to see your insight through. Well, does it really make sense? How do you really know? There's skepticism, all those things,
mhm,
and it's surrender. One of the ways that we try to kind of help people understand it is that it's just a recipe, right? It's not personal or anything. You don't have to be Betty Crocker or Martha Stewart to make a cake using their recipe to get
mhm,
their outcome. And so once you start to understand it in that sense, kind of shift it outside of yourself, not to internalize the change so much. It happens. The transformation gets internalized,
mhm,
but a lot of times people have to be able to see it from outside of themselves to be able to actually access the power. But the great thing about it though is that if you just do the work, like if you just follow the recipe, you get the outcomes, right?
100%. Yeah. Mhm,
You know, it doesn't take anything to click a button to be able to load the internet. That's one of the reasons why it works the way that it does. It's not quite that easy, but it is that simple. And once people can make the shift and simply surrender to the process, they start seeing those outcomes. And one of the great things about this work is watching people have the lights flip on for them, right?
yeah,
And starting to see those outcomes and realizing, oh man, and not allowing them to get mired down in self pity and beating themselves up because they didn't get it sooner.
mhm,
You're gonna get it when you're ready. Our job is to help you to understand what's possible and allow you to be able to get ready yourself, right?
100%. You know, there's, my coach going back to that thing is that it's sometimes hard to see the changes we need to make. My coach told me for like 2 years, "Hey man, you gotta journal," you know, and I was like, "No way, not me," right? And, you know, just kind of like choosing to stay stuck, right? Because it was easier
Mhm,
than, you know, trying to understand why this thing was gonna help right now. Thankfully, he had a lot more patience than I did, right? Because, you know, I don't push nearly as hard on people as he was like pushing on me, right? And so now I'm
mhm,
thankful that he kept on me about all these things that take a while, right? But you know, the hard part about journaling or meditation or any kind of reflective process is like in the beginning, the only real value we realize is we're better at sitting down and writing or sitting down and
right.
thinking, you know, and that kind of feels like, okay, how is this going to help me in the things that I think I need help in, you
Mhm.
know? Ah, that is awesome.
But it's a counterintuitive truth, right? It's the thought that if I go directly at the problem, I'm gonna solve it, when you don't realize that the problem is actually a symptom for
Hmm.
something else. It's deeper and you have to go at the root of it. And it doesn't always mean that you're gonna attack the root. Sometimes you need to sprinkle the poison around the perimeter to be able to get it to penetrate, the earth and be able to seep in and kill the root of the problem. But it requires you being willing to do that, and that
Yeah.
willingness, oftentimes, it only comes when people hit rock bottom. There's a very small percentage of people that are consistently focused on leveling up all the time, so much so that that becomes their practice and their
Hmm.
process. And that takes time, but it's a lesson that's learned. When you look at some of these people that we admire the most in the business world, the Elon Musks and the Steve Jobs, there have been some hard fought battles. And so people often look at their demeanor at the end and say, well, I'm going to be like that now. It's like, well, Steve Jobs is 100,000 times more wealthy than you because he has done the work 100,000 times earlier to be able to get that result. Meaning that
Yeah.
when he was at the 2 or $3 million mark, in order to get to the $100 billion mark, he had to be able to shift in his thinking. And we forget that Steve, he had to be ousted from his company. There were
Hmm.
things that he had to go through. There were certain levels of failures and things that he had to experience that taught him the lessons that when he came back to Apple, he was able to turn that into the juggernaut. And sometimes people, they stumble they stub their toe, they stumble, and they trip and fall in certain failures. They don't always get up. And so our goal, is to be able to help people to understand that you can, that it's part of the process, but there's more that's possible beyond that if you're willing to submit to the process.
One of the things we were talking about before hitting record was, you know, the right framing of failure, right? Uh, this was a big struggle of mine for a long time because my
Mhm.
personality really likes to be right. And so that can lead to endless waiting until I feel like I know enough. I've got it figured out to where it's going to run perfect. And I've had to do a lot of
Right,
work on myself about trying to get out from underneath that weight because it'll just kind of keep me paralyzed. But one of the things that you said that I really appreciated was that sharing that failure is is helpful, not just to, like, other people, but it's also helpful to you, right? Because
mhm,
the way that I think about it now is, like, I wanna proclaim it as a failure as quickly as possible because the quicker that I can see that the experiment failed, right, the faster I can start thinking about, "Okay, what do I need to change?" So that way next time it goes better, you know? How do you work on this with people, right? Because, as you said, these people have gotten to a place of success that most other people haven't, and so it becomes very easy to kind of focus on the wins, right? If we appreciate them at all, because a lot of entrepreneurs are just constantly moving their own goals and then being frustrated that they're not at those goals.
right,
How do you
right.
get people to kind of be more open to the concept that like failure is part of this path and we don't need to run from it?
Yeah, I love this conversation because most people are fixated on not being a failure versus being a success. And so what happens is then you're basically skidding down the road with your foot on the brakes the whole time rather than
Yeah.
accelerating with your foot on the gas, right? There's a couple of ways that we think about it. There's a process we use called target practice. And if you think about the bullseye, right? Everything that you hit that's not the bullseye technically is a failure. Because if your goal is to hit the bullseye,
Hmm.
that's perfection, then everything that does not accomplish that is technically a failure because my goal was to hit the bullseye. However, if you shift that, and what we do is we don't talk about goals, we talk about mission. And when a company has a mission that is clear and everybody is aligned with it, it actually dictates everything that you do in a much better way than goals because goals are arbitrary, missions are mandatory. I often tell my clients, right, when you think about Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible, and he gets that little message that says, "This is your mission. Should you choose to accept it?" His goal is not to jump out of airplanes, do a motorcycle jump across the Himalayas as high as he possibly can, get shot and dodge and skim down skyscrapers. All of those things are not the goal, right? Those things are just a part of the mission. And the mission is something that you will do absolutely everything that is required to accomplish it without question. And so when many people they fixate on goals because the goal becomes an arbitrary measurement of success. But what does it mean? Right?
Hmm.
We give our clients a very simple mission. Like our mission in Icon Status is to be the best business advisory firm in the world. So what does that mean? That colors everything that we do. And so now I can ask the question, if we were the best business advisory firm in the world, what would we do in this instance? How would we do sales? How would we treat our people? How would we onboard clients? How would we advise them to be able to get this optimal outcome? And so when you're focused on that in terms of a mission, then you're willing to do absolutely everything that's necessary, but it actually zeroes your focus down to the bullseye, right? So it doesn't eliminate peripheral vision, but it helps to hone it down so you're clear about what it is. And now going back to the target practice analogy,
Hmm.
my goal now is not to focus on hitting the bullseye. My focus is on how can I get better at pulling back the bow? How can I be more accurate in my assessment of the wind speed? How can I be more disciplined in my process of pulling back the bow to be able to make the arrow fly straighter? And when I focus on the process, I get better at that. And it raises my level. So I hold myself to a higher standard. But the standard is not hitting the bullseye. The standard is being a better archer.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the difference between most, the 0.001% of business owners in the world is that they're focused on being better business owners, while everyone else is focused on making more money, being more tactical in their approach. And so the tactics can only get you as far as the tactics get you.
Hmm.
Focus on being the best business owners you can be. You're going to see quantum leaps in your results and the outcomes that you have through your enterprise.
Yeah. I love that. A long time ago, I was playing poker and I was trying to make that my full-time thing. I thought that was going to be my lane of greatness, if you will. And I was working with a poker coach and we're having this very frustrating conversation. And because he says a line kind of similar to the line that you said, that he goes, "You will improve based upon the quality of the questions you ask yourself." And I was like, "What does that mean?" And he goes, "That means that sometimes you're going to ask me how to win this hand, and my question to you is, why are you even participating in that hand?" And this made me hot, Frederick. I was pretty pissed, right? Because I'm paying this guy all of I think it was like $45 an hour, which felt like a lot at the time. And I was like, I no, like I am paying you so you can help me win more hands. And he goes, "No, you were paying me to help you become a better poker player. This is what I help people with. Is this the help that you're interested in getting?" And
Mhm.
I kinda had to sit with it for like a day and a half, because I was kinda like, "What are we even talking about here? We're talking about the same thing, but we weren't, right? We're talking about intention. We're talking about, the mission to put it into your words as opposed to just like the tactics of it and everything." But I talk about that interaction with everybody that I work with, right? Because you can, there's a big difference going back to something else you said a second ago. There's a big difference between playing to win versus playing not to lose, you know?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so, oh man, I love that because it very much comes down to what are you optimizing for, right? If you're just optimizing to make more money, you're going to go down a path. If you're trying to optimize for, you know, being the best business owner you can be or the best parent you can be, that's going to be different paths, right? And all are valid, right? It's about what you really want to work on. I love that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, one of the reasons why that's so important is because we're not always clear on why we want the things that we want.
Mm,
So the intention is always there, but if it's not clear, you know, there's nothing wrong with making a lot of money. You say you want to be a billionaire. Great. What are you going to do with the money? Because
yeah.
if it only represents an identity, then it's going to be something that's amorphous. It's smoke, right?
Hmm.
And then we all know that if you're chasing smoke, you can't catch it,
Yeah.
right? So if your goal is there's something that beyond this, it represents something more meaningful for you. Now it colors your efforts, and you have the right perspective on what you're doing. Also, as Gary Keller says, right? Um, the challenge of being successful is being able to master the monotony of success.
Mm,
It's boring. It's repetitious,
yep.
right? There's a lot of things that you have to do that you don't want to do. And entrepreneurs are drawn to new things. We love to create. We love to build things, which is often new. But if you have to build the same table every day, right? And that is what's required for you to be able to get to where you want to go. Do you have the discipline? Do you have the framework and structure to be able to execute on that at the level that you need to? And how do you get to that level? How do you maintain enough consistency to get to that level?
Hmm.
Because it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
And when you are, to take your analogy, right? If you're focused on, my ego is telling me, I want to win this hand. I want to win every hand. Versus a great poker player knows I only play the hands that I can win,
Yep.
right? So when should I get in and when should I get out? My father's favorite song is an old Kenny Rogers song, right? You got to know when to hold them,
Hmm.
know when to
Yep.
hold them, know when to walk away, know when to run.
Hmm.
You know, count your money when you're sitting at a table. There'll be time enough for counting when the dealing is done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great song. One of the other things we were talking about, and I think it's tied to this thing, right? You said that most people don't know how to make a good decision, right? And that's an interesting kind of like statement to make, right? And and the work that I do, right, with a lot of people, we're trying to kind of overcome some of their habitual decisions, right? The things that come easy to them and to kind of make new decisions, right?
Right.
Um, where do people get stuck with good decisions, bad decisions? How does that impact their business if they can't make a good decision?
There's a couple of different reasons for that. One is because the way that we see decisions often is rooted in how we were taught about who we are, right? So there's a lot of identity based in that.
Mhm.
One of the things that we're taught is that bad people make bad decisions, right? And so if you're afraid of making the wrong decision, that's another case of playing not to lose
Oh,
versus
yeah.
playing, right?
Absolutely.
The other thing is that decision making seems obvious, right? But there's so many other factors that go into it. And if we don't have the structure for great decision making, then we will default to the lowest level of our training, the lowest level of our conditioning and our understanding, which means that you can only make as good a decision as you understand how to make a decision. To be more clear, right? People often think that money is the primary deciding factor in making a decision. They use that as the default, how
Mhm.
much it cost, right? But there are certain people who say money is no object because not because they have all the money in the world, but because their outcome is not determined by how much money they have, right? Great entrepreneurs, great leaders don't say how much do we have, then we make a decision based on what we have. They say we what do we want and how do we create enough cash flow, enough opportunity and options to be able to accomplish that thing.
Mhm.
Another thing that business owners often do is, for instance, they will think that the solution to getting better employees is to pay everybody more money. And then they base that around that framework. But money is only about 12% of the decision that anybody makes. I'll
Hmm.
give you a perfect example. I don't know if you own the home that you're living in, but when you were when you were buying your house, was money the only thing that made you decide to live there?
No.
No, of course not. I know this because you're married. And and we know that our wives have any number of factors that go into it. How big is the kitchen? What color is the kitchen? How many bedrooms does it have? What's the location? Is it close to a school? Is
Mhm.
it close to other shopping or retail? Or do they want to be out in the country? So when you get down to it, there's probably hundreds of little micro decisions and bigger decisions that you make before you decide you're going to sign on the dotted line. Then you're willing to go through that process of filling out all that paperwork. You've got to get insurance, mortgage insurance. You've got to get all these other things, appraisals, and all the other paperwork that you have to go through. You've got to come up with the money for the down payment. So there's all these factors that are included. Money, price of the house is just one of those aspects.
Mhm.
But most people think when it comes down to it, they let the money decide for them where they're going to live or what they're going to do. And they think that that was the thing that they chose. In reality, they use that as a framework and then they backed into all the other things. Well, I can't afford a house that has a kitchen that I love. I can't afford a house that has more bedrooms. I can't afford, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
Using that as a way of thinking. But if you could back out of it and say, if I could afford anything else, anything that I wanted, where would I live? What would that look like? What am I willing to do? Am I willing to wait until I have the money? Do I have a pathway to create that money?
Mhm.
If I did some things differently, so all those things are factors involved in that. And so when we're walking people through a decision making process, it's about understanding how to sculpt away the things that don't matter, get clear on what does matter, and then create from abundance the pathway towards that. And I know when we use the word abundance, a lot of people use that, kind of self development, it kind of sounds highty flighty or whatever the case may be, really fluffy. But you really have to believe, like, because there's only 2 options. There's only abundance and scarcity. So
Yep.
either it's limited and you're limiting your options, or you're opening up the universe of possibilities. And so where would you rather live? Because you get to choose,
Mhm.
right? Even that is a decision. So what's the framework that you're using for making the decision in your life? Do I believe that I have the power to choose? Am I coming from a place of powerlessness or power?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I get to choose that. And so now you start to see all these different models for thinking that allow you to be able to navigate the world in a different way, and it shows up in your business. It shows up in your life. I just think it's a more powerful way to live, and I think that's one of the things I really encourage people to do is really examine how am I making decisions.
100%. I used to have this line, um, that I would tell people, "I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist," right? But
Mhm.
really, I was a pessimist, right? I would find reasons to not push myself or, to not kinda buy in fully and stuff like this, and then I saw this thing, and I think about it all the time, and, I guess it was a meme, but it said, "Pessimists are typically right." that it's not gonna work, but they also don't ever do anything cool. And it was like one of those weird things of like, I saw that and then, oh, like, let's just go try. Let's not be so sold on this will work or this won't work, because, our personalities and our talk tracks and our upbringing is gonna have a lot of what we can even conceive of being, valid and being, all these things. But like, man, reading that line and just realizing like, oh my God, I have probably shot down as many ideas as I could have just because it was super easy to be like, "Ah, that isn't gonna work," right?
Right.
And, in my work with, like, founders, it's like the first sell is the sell of yourself that, like, you are
Mhm.
enough to go do this, that it's worth trying, right? It's not g the world isn't gonna shatter, right? Now, after that, we need to start laying in some realistic expectations and have a plot and a plan and a path and everything. But, I really think about that line all the time because it's super easy for me to be negative and just, like, find a flaw, find a reason to not try. But,
Mhm.
you know, all of this comes from just trying, right? And seeing what happens whenever I try and not having to sell myself either on the positive or the negative, but like, okay, what would, trying this look like, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, Man,
If I would add to that,
please, yeah.
I think that we often think of the world as binary, right? It's
Yes.
either this or that, right?
Yep.
So even the idea of optimists and I mean, and pessimists or realists and optimists, I think of it in terms of minimalists, maximalists, and optimists. Meaning that minimalists think about the minimal outcomes. They see the glass as half empty, right? This is all there is that's in the glass. An optimist or a maximalist would say, well, the glass is half full. This is all I have, right? I got the most that I could get in here. A maximalist might say, I'm going to fill the glass to the top. It's half
Yeah.
full. I'm going to fill it to the top. But an optimist, an optimalist, if you will, says, I know I can go get more water anywhere. And so if you're only focused on what you have or you don't have, instead of focusing on what is possible to have, right? That's the true now you're creating from abundance, you're creating into abundance, and you're actually out there going and creating greater outcomes. So you're not saying these are all the people that I can serve in my little town or my community, or these are
Mhm.
all the people that are on my Facebook feed or my Instagram or whatever the case may be. Yeah, it's playing by other people's rules instead of learning to play a different game altogether.
100%. Man, well said. I love that. That's so cool. Um, okay, so changing gears just a little bit, right? On your path, Frederick, of working with people and helping them do this deep work and everything,
Mhm.
what season of growth has been like the hardest for you personally, right? You might have hit a ceiling, you might have needed to kind of reflect, you change, do things differently. What was that season like for you where you struggled the most?
There are several significant seasons that come to mind. I think that, if I'm transparent with you, there's no such thing as a season where you don't struggle some,
Mm,
and if you're not struggling at all, then you're probably not stretching or pushing yourself hard enough, right?
100% agree. Yeah. Especially these days, right? Now it's like, what hard thing can I choose to go do, right? Just for the challenge of doing it and stuff like this.
Right,
Um,
right.
yeah, but in so changing gears just a little bit, right? In the growth of your business, like where have you, kind of had the most struggle, had to figure the most out?
I always go back to the beginning, when I told you a little bit about my journey,
Oh yeah.
becoming an entrepreneur, right?
Hmm.
There was a period of time when I was leaving the music industry and I was shifting, but I didn't know that I was shifting, and I'd already been an entrepreneur for about 7 years, and I was running a business remotely, and in the space of a week, I lost my business. I had started working as a junior publicist, celebrity publicist. I lost my job, my business, got in a car accident. 3 days later, the car got repossessed.
Oh my God.
I'm living in the basement of my aunt's house, and I'm laying on the bed with no money, no business, no car, no idea what I'm gonna do. I was 34 years old, trying to figure out, I'm single, I wanna get married, but I don't know that's gonna be possible. Like, who's gonna marry a guy like this, right? I
Mhm.
got nothing. And I remember my mom calling me and asking me, "Hey, what are you gonna do?" And I had no idea. I mean, where would I start with a plan? Um, I remember that I had started a window cleaning business, right? I
Okay.
said, "Ooh, start doing that." And I remember I had no car. I tried to get in the taxi with a bucket of water, and the taxi driver just looked at me and said, "There's no way. You're not getting here with that." I couldn't get on the bus. So I just felt doomed. And in hindsight, I could have just filled up the bucket when I got to the place, but it didn't dawn on me. I was
Yeah.
just like, and that's where I was. I was stuck. Um, what happened though was I had a friend of mine who he let me borrow his card and he said, "I'll sell it to you." But I had no money, of course. He said, "Well, here's what you do. You get $250 and you join this multi-level marketing business that I'm in." So he wanted me to join his downline.
Mhm.
And so I was like, fine, whatever. I didn't care about the MLM, but the thing that happened was, along with that came a subscription to Success Magazine that Darren Hardy used to publish. And at the back of the Success Magazine were these CDs. And this is in a time before YouTube was really popular. It
Mhm.
only been around a couple of years, right? So nobody's watching all the motivational, inspirational things that we see on social media. That didn't exist back then.
Yeah.
But I got these CDs and I could pop them into my car. I got a job working at a home for young boys, at risk youth.
Mhm.
Like, it was an hour away. I had to drive there an hour back and forth every day. And so I pop in these CDs and listen to them. And I'm listening to Les Brown and Tony Robbins and Dale Carnegie and all these people
Mhm.
share these mind-blowing, life-altering truths. And I remember my brain being on fire, and it started opening things up for me and experiencing it. And it was the shift that I needed to be able to see that it was possible to be able to accomplish great things, that greatness was actually inside me. It was possible for me beyond all of the narrow pathways that I'd seen to that, right?
Yeah.
So, all the things that I thought were closed off to me, now I realize, no, there's a new way that you can go. There's a pivot that you can make. And it was unbelievable that time. It's amazing that you can be broke, have no money, be living in your aunt's basement, but have so much hope,
Mhm.
have so much optimism, have so much drive and motivation again. And so that was a moment when I began to live like outside of myself,
Mhm.
to learn, and I got introduced to this world of coaching and leadership and trainings and courses that helped me to be able to see things in a different way. And I started understanding there are entrepreneurs that are building these things, these businesses that are incredible in a way that I didn't understand. I'd been an entrepreneur for 7, 8 years. And I didn't even realize that these things were happening, that people were able to do these kinds of things.
Mhm.
And now we're all kind of exposed to that, and we all have that understanding, right?
Yeah.
But at that time, that wasn't something that was obvious for me. And so that was one of the ways I was able to navigate that whole experience. And it's been helpful for me too. Now I'm able to pull on that. And every time I'm up against another challenge, it just reminds me that I've been at the bottom before.
Mhm.
Right. And that I got up and I was able to get through that, by the grace of God. I was able to navigate through that, and that I have the capacity to be able to do that over and over again, because every level you get to is the highest you've ever been. But if you keep going, it's the lowest you can ever be, because you
Yeah.
can always start from there to get to the next level.
100%. I love that, man. So how long how long were you grinding the tapes, and doing the window cleaning until you made a move out of that?
So several years. I trying to think of the timeline. So I've had multiple businesses.
Mhm.
Around that time, I ended up getting married. I was cleaning windows, still had the job, still driving hour away, doing all the things. And then gradually I broke out of that, started a marketing agency. At the time, I think it was also I was, managing an artist.
Okay.
I moved from creative side to business side, and I was managing an artist at the time. Um, and then that kind of went away. At that time, I transitioned into becoming a partner at a PR firm.
Mhm.
It was a tremendous experience being able to kind of see, oh, there's a different level of success that's possible. We got an office downtown Atlanta, on the 14th floor, the Hurt Building. It was a very cool experience. We actually had our own content studio before people knew what studios were, and there was really even a place to put all that content
Yeah.
where we could do that. Um, and so it was a nice little transition over the next 3 to 4 years that allowed me to be able to do that. But it was not easy, and
Oh,
I
yeah,
remember.
and it's not, what I had to tell everybody is that, like, this kinda work takes a while, right? Because, like, in the beginning, you're just kinda going down a hallway, right? And, like, you might see a window or a door, but if you're just focused on moving forward, you don't even look over in that direction, right? And so, there's a period of you blow past the window of opportunity, right? And then, you can't even see it until, like, you're working with someone who can hopefully help you see it, right? And then there's that mode of like, "Oh, that's what I should have said," or, "Oh, that's what I should have done." It takes a while, right, of reinforcing these ideas, taking it easy on yourself, because it's super easy to beat the crap out of yourself, like, mentally, which just shuts down any of this opportunity to really work on yourself to where you can move with intention and keep moving forward, see a window, judge if it's a window that you wanna dive through or not, or just, like, keep on moving through and be able to kind of act all that in relation to everything else that's going on, it's not a workshop, it's not a book, it takes time, it's always the number one thing that I run into when I'm dealing with a founder or someone wanting me to come in and work with their sales team. Okay, how long until it works? If you're asking that question, we need to kind of slow things down significantly and talk about some other things, like what's your real expectation here, and stuff like that.
Right. I think one of the things that we often, when you're not in, this happens more in desperation mode. When you kind of get to the point where things have not worked the way that you want them to for long enough, you
Mhm.
get to this point where you're kind of fed up and you're desperate for something to work. But at that point, oftentimes we're desperate enough to ask for help, but we want the help to happen right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what we really need is the capacity to understand that, as Marshall Goldsmith said, right? What got you here won't get you there.
Mhm.
Einstein said that a problem cannot be solved by the same mind that created it.
Mm.
So everything that we did to get us to here is the same thing that creates a problem that keeps us from getting to the next level. So if you want to be able to move beyond that, you have to become a different version of yourself. I talk about the 5 levels of leadership, roughly, and how they relate to revenue streams. And the first level of leadership is just being able to learn to lead yourself. Right?
Oh, yeah.
You have to be able to get yourself to do the things required to get the outcomes that you say that you want. And typically that's, 0 to 6 figures, and that 6 figures can be three, four, $500,000. And then the second level of leadership is learning to lead your clients or your customers.
Mhm.
You have to be able to create a solution that they will follow and they will buy into. They will actually literally give you money for it, right? And so you can kind of brute force that first level. The second level requires a little bit more finesse and a certain skill. And
Yeah.
then the third level of leadership is learning to lead your team, right? You've got to be able to get results through others. We call it RTO, getting results through others. You've got to be able to inspire people. You got to learn how to lead them so that they can get the results that you're getting yourself, but at an even higher level than you could do it by yourself, right?
Mhm.
So then there's learning. The fourth level of leadership is learning to lead your market, right? How can you do things and position yourself in a way that's clearly unique so that people see you as the only option for what you're doing, right? And getting the outcome that they want. And that level can get you up to $100 million, 9 figures, definitely, if you're a market leader in your space.
Mhm.
Fifth level leadership is learning to lead the world. How can you be singular in what you're doing, that identity? These are $1 billion plus companies, right? And there's a rarity there, in terms of what they do, but they all have a unique positioning and a edge in the world that allows people to look to them and say, "We want your guidance, not just in this market, not just in this business, but now there's an expectation and responsibility that you're gonna have an impact, globally, environmentally, politically, whatever the case may be, and you have to be ready for those levels of leadership.
Mhm.
You've gotta have, values and things that you can adhere to, but you've gotta be able to understand how your influence affects those around you and how you can deploy that in the proper way." And so when people don't understand these levels of leadership, what they're doing is every time they get to the bottom of that next level, right, where they need to make that shift, that's where they're gonna feel the friction. That's where they're gonna
Yep.
feel that tension. And so that tension that they're putting on you and I is, I need you to be able to make this thing happen for me. And they think it's a dollar amount. And in
Mhm.
reality, it's a shift that you get to make about who you are.
Mhm.
Where is your leadership level? Where are you able to impact people? How are you able to affect things through this vessel, this vehicle that you built called a business? Because the business is only going to respond to you. You are the driver. You're the pilot, right?
Yeah.
You
Yep.
know, so if you don't have that capacity to be able to do that, then you're still going to struggle, and it's always going to be a war. So it doesn't matter who you get to consult. It doesn't matter how much you pay them. If you're not ready to make that shift and you're not ready to help your people to make that shift in your business, if it doesn't have the structure for that, which to that point, most businesses, 99% of businesses do not have the structure to be able to be more successful than they already are.
Hmm. What do you mean by that?
Well, I liken it to, I just talked about a business being a vehicle, right? So
Mhm.
if you want to go across the street, you will walk. If you want to go down the street, you might take a bicycle. If you want to go across town, you might take a car or a
Mhm.
bus. If you want to go across the state, you would take a car. If you want to go across the country, you would take a plane. If you want to go, ar- to another planet, the moon, you got to take a rocket. The vehicle that you use is determined by where you want to go. You can't
Mm.
get to that destination if you don't have the vehicle that's going to get you there. And so, a lot of times, people are focused on. They think they're focused on that destination, but they don't realize I want to go overseas, but I've got a bicycle as a vehicle right now. You gotta
Okay.
be able to build something that has more substance, that has the engine and the capacity to be able to take you where you wanna go.
Okay. I like that. Um, you know, we kind of talked a little bit about your early music career, and I really like whenever I get to talk to, especially musicians, right? Because
Mhm,
musicians are grinding, right? They're wearing a lot of hats. Most people don't start with a team and everything, and
mhm.
I just really appreciate when people have walked different paths. When you think about your time in music versus the work that you do now, what do you think you pull from that time of being a musician that continues to help you in your work now? Like, what's the most helpful thing from that time?
I think there's a couple of things. One one thing is I realized that we are who we are, that there are a lot of there's a genius that we have. I call it giftedness, right? There's a gift that we have that shows up effortlessly when we're moving in that space, but most of us don't always recognize it. And the way that my genius showed up was in 2 ways. I was a songwriter slash, producer, but mostly vocal production. So I would get in there with the artists in the studio and help them to be able to perform the song at the level to get the best vocal performance out of them.
Mhm.
Literally, that's coaching. I have to get into their
Absolutely.
head and help them to become a version of themselves that will get this best possible performance. A lot of times I'm writing the song. So I have to create a vehicle. I have to give a message that they're going to be able to convey. One of the things that is often overlooked because we have a magnitude of probably 1,000 or 100,000 number of artists that are out now because the barrier of entry is so low. So
Mhm.
people don't have to perfect that art of being an artist as much as they used to. You had to really, really work on your craft. One of the things that kind of goes overlooked is how certain artists have a certain brand. There's a certain style of message or song that they're going to convey. They represent an idea. When you get to become iconic, like a Beyonce or Rolling Stones or somebody like that, you're no longer just the music itself. It's not just about being a great artist. It is about you embody an idea that people can envelop themselves around. They you bring them into your world. There's a perspective and a way you convey love, living, um, ownership, self, whatever the case may be. What I was able to understand was that as a writer, you have the capacity to be able to give the artist that thing that they then offer to the world, right? Many great artists can write the songs themselves, but I was able to be in service of that way in that way. And so one of the things that I'm able to bring into the business world is to convey this message. You need to be able to say things in a certain way. It's not just copywriting, but it involves copywriting. It's not just messaging, but it involves messaging. It's not just sales, but it involves sales. But it's always about how do you position this idea in somebody's head so that they can take ownership of it. You know, it's inception, literally, but it's through music, it's through a song, a lyric, a concept, a title, whatever the case may be. So bringing those two things, right? So the idea, the message, being able to be a translator for that message, and then coaching the artist through it the same way that I, coach my clients and advise them on how to get the outcomes that they want. It's not me doing the work for them. It is helping them to be able to raise to the level where they can bring out the best of themselves and they get the outcomes that they're looking for. It's a partnership, but it's being able to see that best, that greatness that's in other people. Because oftentimes artists, just like entrepreneurs, they have doubts, they have insecurities, you
Mm,
know. They're not sure that they can actually get to this next level. And there is a level that can be unlocked, but it requires understanding, right? And it requires opening up. And there's a level of vulnerability and transparency that when I'm looking at entrepreneurs, you know, we would love to do it through brute force, that the numbers would justify everything.
mhm,
You work sales, right? So, people think, well, if we can just sell our way out of this problem. And
yeah,
it's true. Enough profitable sales will cure 99% of your problems, but the 1% of those problems is that you still have to run the business,
100%. Yeah,
right? So you can sell
absolutely,
people, but the business doesn't have the structure, then you're still in trouble. So
absolutely.
I think that's the question though. Those are the two skills that I really take from music.
I love that, right? Like we because I appreciate the artist path as much as I appreciate the entrepreneur path, right? Like, just go read any biography on like any big artist, right? And you're gonna find a lot of overlap with the stuff you're gonna read about in any entrepreneur's biography, right? There's a lot of doubt, there's a lot of loneliness, there's a lot of like, am I enough and everything. So, being able to kind of like stay on track with that stuff is difficult. Switching gears a little bit, Frederick, right? We're going to get into the rapid fire side of this because, we're coming up on time and I want to make sure we spend the time well and we can get on with our day. First question. When you start thinking about um, what a founder needs to know on their first days, right? Whether that comes from mindset or limiting belief or sit and reflect, what does a brand new founder need to be thinking about when it comes to like their mindset and how they think about their performance and decisions?
The number one thing that I would say that they need to think about is that they have a gift. There is something that they are uniquely qualified to do. A lot of people, when they are starting a business, they're thinking about what's the thing that I can build that will be successful.
Mm,
Yeah. Instead of thinking, what am I uniquely qualified to be successful at effortlessly that I can then build around to create a business? I talk about this a little bit in The Lie That Keeps You Broke, right? It's the lie of lack. And so a lot of entrepreneurs are building from a place of lack.
mhm.
They're building based on what they don't have versus what do I have that is unique that the world would be the path to me to be able to help them to solve. When I was this is not rapid fire answer, but
You're fine. I like the depth. Keep going.
when I was at one of my lower points as well, my wife and we had three small children and we were in eviction. There was an eviction notice on our house and I needed to be able to pay the rent. Didn't have the money to pay the rent, but I had my marketing business trying to get that off the ground. And I actually ended up, borrowing the money from my dad to hire this coach because I had to figure out the answer long term.
Mhm.
And, in that process, he would often talk about we would use in the community that he had, we would talk about, the gift, using your gift. But we never really defined what that was. And he gave me an assignment one time. He said, "Why don't you write down what your solution is for your clients?" And so I banged around on that thing for about a week and I could not figure it out. John, I was so frustrated. And I finally messaged him back and I said, "Man, I don't think I have a solution." And what he said blew my mind, changed the trajectory of my life. He said, "God doesn't make people without solutions." And it's like a bomb went off in my head. And what I started to unravel, which is what led me to writing my first book, Breaking Orbit, was that what is the gift? What does it mean to have a gift? And the way that I define it is your unique capacity to impact the world in a singular and powerful way. There's a thing that you can do, John. There's a way that you see the world. There's a way that you convey truth to people in a way that nobody else can. That's valuable in and of itself because the most valuable number in the world is one. If you are the number one neurosurgeon, if you are the number one XYZ in the world, it's not just because you have the skill set, which is true, but it's also because you have a unique capacity, a unique set of talents and skills and perspective all wrapped around your gift that allows you to be able to do that. So for entrepreneurs who are starting out, I would say start there. Find the
I
thing that's
love
the
that.
most valuable about you because it's already going to be hard, right? It's already going to challenge you. So don't make it harder than it has to be by trying to do things that other people are doing in the way that they're doing it. Because when we talk about a recipe, yes, the recipe is for the structure. The recipe is, look, bank accounts have been set up the same way forever. You don't have to reinvent the wheel in that regard. But in terms of how you get to the money, how you create that value, the most valuable thing is to be able to build something that's unique that only people can only get from you. They
Mhm.
can have to come to your company to get that result in that particular way. It makes you valuable from the beginning, and that's a much, much better business to build than the one that most people are starting out with.
Oh, yeah. 100% agree with that, right? The whole idea of, like, and you hit this so beautifully, like, what is a business that'll be successful versus, like, what am I supposed to be doing?
Mm,
Like, these are very different conversations, right? And moments of reflection. Next question. What
good
is
thing.
the lesson that you can see now in the form of a tweet or a social media post, and you're like, "Yep, I get it," but you had to go through the adversity, through the challenge, like, through that learning the lesson the hard way before you could really appreciate it?
Oh yeah, here's one. I think you'll appreciate this because it most directly relates to sales, but I think it also corresponds to just the way that you structure your business.
Mm,
That is that, um, what is it? Sell people what they want, not what you want.
mm,
You
yeah.
know, people often, so as business owners, entrepreneurs can be creatives, right? And so we fall in love with the thing that we're building and we love it so much.
Oh, yeah.
We want to talk about all the things that we did. And I polished the wood like this. I got these brand new state of the art chips and they're smaller than anything and they fly higher than this and XYZ. And people don't care about any of that stuff. People buy what they buy for their reasons, not for yours, right?
100%. Yeah.
So the clearer you get on what their reasons are, and the more willing you are to sell them for their reasons, the more successful you're going to be, the much less friction you're going to have. And it's hard because our ego gets in the way. We want people, again, because we want people to recognize, we want people to laud us for the thing that we built.
Yep.
Oh, you're amazing. Look what you did. I love that will all happen if you just give them what they want and get better at giving them what they want.
Mhm.
Um, and it's not, see, the idea is not that what you know they need is not important, but you can't give them what they need until you give them what they want.
100%. Yes. Oh, man. I had to learn that lesson so many times, right? And like, honestly, I think it's a Carnegie line of no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care kind of thing, right? And A good friend of mine was always hitting me with that line, right? Before I even read any Carnegie, right? Because I was kind of like, Carnegie, this is an old school book. I don't need to read this and everything. And a friend of mine was always talking about that line specifically, right? Because I was
Mm,
going around, I'm smart, you should buy from me. I'm smart, I know what I'm talking about, you should buy from me, right? Like, well, people don't buy for those reasons. They buy for their reasons, and if I don't even slow down enough to try to uncover what those reasons are, I'm going to miss the mark.
you
So
are,
I love
yeah,
that. It's very easy to get caught up in our own intelligence, our own creative drive. Look how great, look how shiny this is, and stuff like this, right? But the old sales adage is no one is excited about buying a quarter-inch drill bit, right? They're excited to like hang photos of their family on their wall.
exactly,
So don't make it
exactly.
about the drill bit, make it about the ease, stuff like this. Oh man, I still struggle with that sometimes. I get very in the weeds of we're going to do this and this and this and this and this. And it's like, okay, is this going to help me move the needle? Yep. Okay, wait a minute. I need to back up and make sure that this is focused on what you're looking for, not what I'm going to be giving you. Oh
Right,
man.
100%, 100%.
Last question, Frederick. You've been in the space for a long time. You ran multiple businesses, right? What is if you were going to start over today, what is the piece of advice you would give yourself to make sure that you have maybe a somewhat more linear path, right? And direction to where you are?
I would definitely get better at sales. I would start to understand the sales process better. The coach that I hired was a sales coach,
Mm,
and it still took me several years to get good at it, right? I
same.
had to work through that monotony of it, of making those calls, of getting through rejection, things of that nature. But the things that I've learned about sales now and understanding, right? I wouldn't call it effortless, but it's completely different than it was when I
Oh
first
yeah.
started. And I wasn't even doing sales at the level that I really needed to. I didn't understand that process of creating a lead, nurturing a prospect, going into that whole conversation, qualifying them, et cetera, et cetera. All those different things, all those components were foreign to me. I thought, well, if I just, put up my marketing, put that out there, and then your
Hmm.
people will understand I need marketing. Everybody needs marketing. But people they don't necessarily think that they do. Marketing or well, nowadays people do. It's an idea that's out there. We gotta have marketing.
Hmm.
But even in marketing, people don't understand what that is. Marketing is, Cialdini persuasion, it's influence.
Great book. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
Phenomenal book.
Yeah, and
Uh,
it's like, how do I tell people a story that enrolls them into this process of becoming a client, right?
yep.
And how Donald Miller has story brand and that whole aspect. There's a story there, right? But a story is not just this linear once upon a time. A story is an idea. How do I get better at inception in allowing people to be able to visualize themselves standing at the finish line, waving the checkered flag, holding the trophy because they worked with us, because they employed something that we used? How do I create that image for them? How do I get better at doing that? And so if I had done that, it probably would have shaved years off. There's a lot of hard-earned and hard-learned advice, and insight, but
I mean,
that's where I
if
would
I'm
probably start.
if I'm being honest, right, like I got to work with a sales coach for like probably 4 or 5 years
Mm,
before I went out and started this thing, right? It was hugely helpful. I would never have been able to get to this place to where I could run my own business. But there was a guy on the show and he said this beautiful line around the idea that like uh, even because he had a similar path, he worked as a sales trainer, then went and led a team before launching his own sales training brand. He said, "I still had to go through the thing of figuring out how to, like, sell myself."
mm,
And so I think it's one of those things to where no matter what it is you're selling, right? There's that season of, the listening tour. Like what do people really care about? What are they like interested in buying and stuff like that. But I think there's always that mode of if you're selling something that is, strategic or very custom or tied to like your greatness, you have to package it differently than selling just about anything else, right? And I struggled with that, and every person I know who has done a fair amount of sales training but then goes out on their own, has to go through that kind of like gauntlet again of like learning how to do it for their own stakes, right? And for their own way, and disconnecting from the outcome, because it's not character assassination if someone doesn't need our help. If anything, we should be happy that they're at a place to where they're not in dire need of our services, right? As opposed to getting mad or belligerent or thinking that they're the problem, right? Like we got to be big enough and abundant enough to go find someone else to talk to. And
Right. Right.
sometimes if we don't have that disconnection, it feels like character assassination, you know? So,
One of the things that really helped me to make a tremendous shift was the way that I characterize what sales is at all, and this is what a lot of people struggle with. The reason why it's difficult for people to be successful at sales for their business or anyone else's is because they see it as personal.
mm,
It's almost a validation. And a lot of, especially old school sales tactics, is about hand to hand combat. You're going to pin the customer to the mat and make him say uncle, right? And
yeah,
it's not that at all. Even the quote that your guest was sharing, right? The perspective that I have on it is that selling yourself doesn't mean convincing someone that you're worthy of buying from. Selling yourself means you are creating an environment where you're helping this person. Like the definition of sales that we use is a series of questions designed to lead a person to the point of a decision. We were talking about decision making earlier, right?
mhm,
Lead a person to the point of a decision. You are supporting them in achieving their desired goal, even if their decision means to go with somebody else. But it should be, if you do your job well enough, it should be obvious why your product or service is the choice for them, right? For two
100%.
reasons. One, because you've helped them to get clear on why they're making this decision at all. And two, because you're the person that helped them to do it. Why would they want to start over with somebody else? And if you do it the right way, the difference is starkly contrasted. It's obvious, right?
Mhm,
Other people are trying to do the exact same thing. It's caveman style. They're trying to beat you over the head and drag you home. Whereas when you are walking alongside them and saying, hey, these are the things you say you want to make, right? Think about a great real estate agent. There's people who can just show you the home and say, well, you just decide, do you like this house or not? There's
mhm,
somebody who says, hey, you said you want to be close to this school. It's got these in the area. I went and I put a map out and it showed you exactly the proximity. This is what traffic looks like at this time of day, right? You say you work down here, etc. What have you thought about this? All the different factors that come into helping them make a decision, you feel comfortable. It's a partnership. And if
yep,
you approach it in that way, it creates a vastly different experience, and it allows us, because now it's not rejection, right?
mhm,
Whether somebody bought or not, I did my job.
yep,
My only job is to help you to reach a point of a decision. And if you can't make a decision, I didn't do my job good enough. And if you make a decision that involves not being with me, it should be obvious to both of us this isn't a good fit, right?
100%. Oh, man, well said, dude. Very, very, very cool. Frederick, if people wanna come hang out with you, keep up with you, see your stuff, take a look at your content and everything, where's the best place for them to come connect with you?
Yeah, man, I'm everywhere. Fredrick Douglas Bussey on Facebook, Fredrick Bussey on X, Twitter, Fredrick Bussey on Instagram. I'm on TikTok, but don't expect anything new from me there. LinkedIn,
No
Frederick
worries.
Douglas Bussey, YouTube, Icon Status is the channel.
Okay,
Uh, yeah, so we've got a lot of content, always writing and putting out videos, master classes, things of that nature. Come
perfect.
check us out. And also always the books, Breaking Orbit, and the new book, which is The Lie That Keeps You Broke, 30 Days to Crush Imposter Syndrome and Go From Purpose to Profit.
I love it. Frederick, thank you so much for coming on. This is there's a lot of deep topics in here, right? And I'm hoping that people have the room and the space to kind of like downshift a little bit so that way they can hear it, action some of these things that we're talking about. But really appreciate you coming on, man. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
John, it's been a blast. Thank you for having me.